All right, welcome everybody to another show. Thanks for tuning in this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. Today, I think we've got we've got a subject that is going to be, I think, probably most relevant to folks that are in Washington or have employees in Washington State, um, and although there's many of you that are on here because some of these salary threshold exemptions and things do affect folks in other states as well. So, anyhow, I have the foremost authority on compensation, Nancy Kasmar from Compensation Connections, and she's going to talk with us a little bit today about these salary exemption thresholds, among other things. And this is something that is going to be maybe a little bit scary, and that's why we decided to do this here the day before Halloween, not to frighten anybody, maybe to get you in the spirit of Halloween for tomorrow, I suppose. But again, first and foremost, this is something where these salary exemption thresholds are coming into effect on January 1st, and believe it or not, we're right around the corner from the new year. And so we felt like this would be a great time to have a longtime colleague of mine, Nancy, come on and explain all of this for our Washington clients, as well as any of the employers that we work with that have employees in Washington, because it will affect them as well too. So, without any further ado, let me allow Nancy to introduce herself, perhaps a little bit further. She's very modest. But Nancy, you are a powerhouse when it comes to compensation and in helping public sector, private sector, nonprofits, everybody help sort out what they need to do in terms of creating a compensation package for their employees. Nancy, take it away.
Okay, so Nancy Kasmar, I'm one of the two owners of Compensation Connections, me and Shannon Drummond. Started the business in 2014. We have 14 consultants. And like he said, we work with nonprofit, for-profit, and governmental agencies. And I think our smallest client is 6 people, and our largest client has about 10, 11,000, something like that. So we kind of fill the whole gamut in between. And this is one of my favorite topics. I don't know why. I guess you could say I'm a data geek, But every year when the new data comes out, it's like, "Ooh, this is so cool." But our tagline is, "We help employers figure out what to pay their people." And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, well, no, that's perfect, and it's especially as we look at how that has shifted over the last, we'll say, 5 years now. You've been busy, right? I mean, most definitely, it's shifted quite a bit. And I was just looking at some more data recently, and again, just how the labor market has changed, not just the compensation, but companies looking to hire. There was a point where they couldn't fill any positions that they really desperately wanted, and then they were, so it's been a roller coaster these last few years, in particular. So. Yeah, and then of course, the other thing on top of that, what we've seen, at least on our side of the industry in health insurance and benefits, is there's been some new regulations that have come into place, and there's been some new, rules around different things and reporting and such. And I think about my conversation last month with Patrick Moore about the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And this is a little bit different because this is more at the state level. But again, there are multiple states that we've seen are doing this. It does seem, for one reason or another, that Washington is really kind of leading the charge on these salary exemptions, which, you and I talked about, several weeks ago. The other thing we weren't sure about was exactly what that threshold was going to be. So in some of our marketing, I got some feedback from folks saying, "Hey, did you realize that it is this amount?" And I had to explain, yes, I fully understand. When we created the video and when we set up the marketing for this, we weren't quite sure. And so that's always kind of a challenge, is that now we know what those numbers look like. And again, at this point, we're just barely over 60 days from the new year and when these things take effect. So anyhow, so at any rate, I guess maybe give us, if you could, Nancy, just to set the table for folks today, maybe give us kind of a look back on, I know obviously we're going to look forward to what is coming in place for January 1st, but give us a look back on these last 5 years just to kind of set the table for folks here that maybe don't work with you yet, and give them a primer of kind of what you've seen over these last few years when it comes to compensation.
Yeah, talking about the last few years, the first thing that popped in my mind was, yeah, we went from 8% increases that people got in with the pandemic, with the recovery from the pandemic in 2022, inflation was so high. People were handing out 8% increases like they were like a lot of folks did. Some people handed out more. Some people couldn't
Hmm.
afford that much, but they handed out as much as they could. Now we're talking, people are saying, well, 3% maybe, which is a really different, it's a different place. Would the jobs market is completely different. People are getting laid off. I mean, it's just a different, totally different ballpark.
Yeah, well, we even just saw that this week. I know, Amazon just
Yeah.
announced, a bunch of layoffs here locally to us in this Seattle area. Um, and yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And there's people I know that, have gotten laid off earlier in this year or even late last year that are still looking for work in a
Yeah.
kind of a similar position. So yeah, it is a much, much different place than we were just a few short years ago. But
The interview now is like a big deal.
It is. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's so many people out there that are looking for work and stuff like that. So, um, anyhow, well, so let's kind of shift then to these salary exemptions. So maybe just set this up for what does this salary exemption mean if you're hourly, if you're salaried, if depending on different kind of work roles. I know we talked a little bit about that at the beginning of the month when we had our first recording and created the marketing for this for this event that we're on now. So share with us a little bit about what exactly this means, and maybe some of the if you can put on, just be a legislator for a moment and think about what the dynamics were here, what maybe the thought process was in setting this up, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, so the this is where I say my favorite statement, which is I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV. So anything I say can't be considered legal advice. Very important. Um, and the other thing I will add to that is if anything that you hear today, anything that concerns you, you get concerned about anything that we talk about, definitely an employment law attorney can help you with it. It has two advantages. One, it's defensible, and two, attorney-client privilege applies. You can make it apply so that you all your questions aren't going to be like recordable kind of thing. So I think that's
Hmm.
really important. But the short version of what an exemption is people who are exempt means that they're not paid, they're paid a salary, they're not paid, and they're not paid hourly, and they're not paid overtime. That's like the most basic way of doing it. There's different ways to have people be exempt from overtime, and that's if they have certain job duties, and the federal government has very closely defined that. The law was passed in 1938, and that's been slowly increased ever since. One of my favorite statistics about the FLSA, or the Fair Labor Standards Act, is that when it was passed in Congress, there was an argument over paying somebody 25 cents an hour. That was very interesting. Little historical perspective there, not quite 100 years ago. But there's every job you want to look at. Does this require overtime or not? And there's different tests that you can do for different jobs. There's different categories of tests. And it's kind of like one of the things you're just going to learn when you get into HR. It's one of the first things you have to get very knowledgeable about. And every state has its own application of them. Washington State definitely is one of those that have specific rules that they follow of the federal guidelines, and rules that they don't follow, that they have their own state guidelines. But the idea is that you have to comply with both federal and state. And the idea is for the Washington state threshold, the law that we're following now, the purpose of doing it in the legislature's mind was to make sure that people got paid for all the time that they worked. They wanted to make sure that people weren't working overtime and not getting paid for it because the threshold for getting paid for overtime was so low. That's
Right, right.
that's the top line.
Right, right. And so that's where I think that it was done with the best of intentions. And it's
Yes.
crazy to think that, 25 cents an hour, that's what they were arguing over, 80 plus years ago or whatever it
Yes.
was,
Yes.
as you mentioned. But yeah, and so I think what was interesting and what we talked about and where this gets a little bit scary for some employers is, um, you're talking about salary thresholds for people that are well in salaried positions. So again, it doesn't necessarily apply to hourly folks because hey, if you're working more than 40 hours in a week, then you're going to get paid overtime. Whereas people that are salaried and where my head goes and where I remember us talking about a few weeks ago was some of these middle managers, some of these people that might be working 50, 60 hours a week, maybe more than 60 hours a week, which is a lot. And hopefully you're earning a salary that's commensurate to the value you're producing, right? Um, uh, but it's those people that are going to fall in this category. And now this salary threshold, it's really starting to ratchet up, rather quickly
Some
and
place.
is in some, okay, so go ahead, explain.
Okay, so I think this is the perfect time for me to show the different numbers, if that's okay
Oh,
with you.
please. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna share I'm gonna share my screen and this is making sure everybody can see it. Okay, so for 2026, the exempt salary thresholds this is what they're gonna be throughout the United States. The one that I think most states, all like out of the 50 states, 44 have followed the federal salary threshold, 35,568 or $684 a week. And the only places that are higher than that, there's 6 states, and I'm gonna put that up there. Alaska is one of the states. They changed theirs in July 1st, is when theirs switches over to the new 2026 level. California announced theirs about a month and a half ago. Colorado has not announced theirs yet. They don't announce it till December, so I don't have the
Hmm.
2026 number. Uh, and then all the rest of them are effective in the 1st of January. New York has two different ones depending on where you live, where you're working, and then of course there's Washington State, which is in a state all by itself. Um,
Hmm.
they announced the they announced the 2026 salary threshold the 1st of October. It's based on the Washington State minimum wage and then a multiplier of it. And depending on your employer size, since 2020, we've been ratcheting it up from the federal threshold to where it is now. And for 2026, it's going to be 80,168 and 40 cents. Which has got the fact that we crossed the $80,000 threshold has a lot of people quite concerned. But they publish a projection beyond all the way up through 2028 where the multipliers keep going up. We're almost at the top of it. 2028 is the last of the multipliers changing. And in 27, it's going to be still the 2.25 times the minimum wage for smaller employers, excuse me. And it's going to be for 51 or more employees, it's going to be over 91,000. And that's projected based on a 2.5% increase in the CPI. If it's higher than that in the next year, that amount will be higher because it's a multiplier of the Washington State minimum wage, and that's based on the CPI, and that changes every year. So good times, right? And then in 2028, I understand. In 2028, it's predicted to be at 93,000 or possibly a little bit higher. And after 2028, the multiplier stays at 2.5 times and just keeps going up with the minimum wage, which means we could be somewhere near 100,000 by 2030. And I know you're
Yeah.
just, Yeah, I know you're just dying to hear those numbers, right?
Right, right,
Which is
right.
why we scheduled this and near Halloween. So, yeah, good times, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and again, when you think about who this is going to affect, that becomes part of the question then if you're an employer is it kind of puts you in this rock and a hard place where it's like, all right, what so then, what do you do? Or maybe are there a couple of examples maybe that you have of concerns that some, and obviously, don't share any names, but do you have any examples of what some of the strategies are maybe short term, long term, what are some of the things that you're advising your clients to do, or the way to think about this?
The one thing is to look at all your jobs and all your like if you have employees in any of these states, you're definitely going to want to look at, what's their job? Does the job still meet the classification? In fact, I actually have a slide on that. Let me I'll put it up. It's one more slide and then I promise I won't be doing it anymore.
You're fine. No, it's helpful. We like visual aids here. So,
Okay. So this is my recommendations. If you have everybody has exempt level jobs, so make a list of them. What exemption are we applying to them? And for everybody in those jobs, what state are they in? Because that makes a difference. And what's
hmm
their current salary? And then if somebody's near that and you don't want to move them up to the next threshold, which would be a little bit scary for some people, you would reclassify them to be non-exempt, or if there's a job that maybe it presents a risk another way that you want to make sure that you look at the job description, have the job duties change. When was the last time you or your attorney did your FLSA classification? These are all things that you want to check just to make sure you're complying with the law, because compliance is what this is really all about. So that's kind of the top level. I can tell you that we have clients who have reclassified everybody below a director level because they know where the threshold's going, and they just
hmm
decided to not keep raising people up to the threshold for the next year. And I used to recommend people uh, calculate overtime if they paid people overtime, should they reclassify people or just and how much is it going to cost versus how much would they have to raise their salary, but it's going to keep going up. So calculating the overtime for this year doesn't probably help next year in Washington State. Now, other
mm
states it might, but not Washington State because we know where it's going, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the scary
Yeah.
part.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, and even, like you mentioned, it's going to be north of six figures by, when we enter the next decade in
Oh,
2030 or shortly after.
pretty soon after, yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. It is a little bit scary. And so what you're saying is that you've seen some of your clients get ahead of this, and by reclassifying some of those jobs just to stave off these headwinds, or um, to be
Yeah,
out in front of it, I
yeah, like
suppose.
so 2028, the $93,000 number, that's 2 years away minimum. I mean, 2 years, okay? So reclassifying people who are below that minimum is a great strategy because then you know you're in compliance no matter what it is in 27, and then you also know that you're in compliance or very close to it in 28.
Yeah,
People get increases every year from their employer for different reasons, for different types of increases, and $11,000 between now and 2027 for an employer with more than 50 employees is quite scary.
yeah, it's certainly significant. Yeah,
And then you
that
multiply it
is
by the number of people and it gets even scarier.
right. Yeah, 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 absolutely. Um, and then so you mentioned, obviously that's a state regulation. So who is checking in on employers, and who is verifying that that folks are in compliance in that case? I mean, so at the federal level, you've got the FLSA.
Department of Labor, yeah. I think it would be a combination of state and federal people, but I think that would be a good lawyer question.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Um,
I
all
have a
right. Well,
friend, I have a friend who is a lawyer, and all she does is FLSA work for the firm that she works for. That's all she does is defend employers.
okay.
Can you imagine?
No, I can't. I do know a couple of employment law attorneys. I know a few people that are specifically focused on ERISA too, obviously, in with what I do in my line of work in health insurance. But yeah, I do know a couple um, of um, yeah of employee relations kind of folks, probably similar to this person you know as well. And no, I can't imagine that because yeah, it's one of these things that if you're an employer, obviously that's kind of the worst case scenario, right? There's maybe something else is broken, maybe it's the wrong person, something else is broken within your culture or what have you, to the point where you have to get advice from somebody like that. And that's where I think, if you're able to work with if there's an employer who's on here listening, if you're able to work with Nancy and avoid having to get attorneys involved, obviously that would be the most preferential way to deal with this.
When you're
And
nervous about it, contact an attorney. Don't wait for it to be in trouble. Wait, be proactive. You just say, I'm wondering about this. Well, I wonder if I should have this FLSA redone by my attorney because it was done like 3 years ago. Yeah, great idea. Because if you've redone the job description, great idea to redo it again.
right. Well, and particularly if you're making changes to, like you were just saying, some of your clients have done, they've reclassified some of these jobs. You need to update that anyways,
Yeah.
and you might as well do that. And then you've got that paper trail to be able to show, just like we do with a fiduciary review.
Yep.
That way you can show, hey, look, we did our homework here. We've done all of these things that these different agencies have asked us to do, and these regulations require us to do. And and yeah, that I think is just a good business practice in general. But
I mean,
um,
employees are happy about being reclassified, mind you. Like one of our
no, of
clients
course
told
not.
me that some clients already have their people track their time, but one of our clients told us that the people that were getting reclassified really hated was documenting their lunch breaks. They really hated that part.
Oh,
But there's nothing you can do about it. It's part of the regulations, you know?
yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah. So yeah, take it up with your representatives in the state Congress, I guess, right? No.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's and we see this every year too with, if I can just make a parallel to open enrollment, right? It's like one of the things I tell employers all the time is, look, if you make no changes, you're going to have people that are going to be unhappy with that. If you make any changes, even the slightest one whatsoever, you're going to have people that are going to be unhappy with that. So, moral of the story is, if you start a business and you have employees, you're going to have some people that are going to be unhappy for one reason or another, and maybe it has nothing to do with any of this, and that, or whatever, who knows. But at any rate, it's definitely something that, us as human beings hate change, and if there is a change and it's something we have no control over whatsoever, then we're going to be upset about that. And that's, I think, something that is universal, and is something that is just something that we have to kind of step through and deal with, and adapt to, and those types of things. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, you can't, and it ends, you can't please all the people all the time. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, so as we start to look at some, so you've mentioned reclassifying jobs. What are some other strategies or tactics that you're seeing some of your clients look at doing, debating on doing any of those types of things? Is there anything else out there that you feel like that has been a kind of a creative solution that they've looked at, or um,
Well, planning ahead is really the key. And the more that your managers know and understand about the law and about compensation and why it's being done, and A lot of my clients, when they reclassify people, the bottom line is we have to do this to be in compliance with the law. It's
Hmm.
not something that I'm doing happily. It's because we want to make sure you're in compliance. And oh, by the way, we want to make sure you get paid for all the time you work. And like one of my clients told me, I think last week, was that they had a manager who just said, I'll tell you what, I'll just write down less time so you don't have to pay me the overtime. It's like, no, you have to write, people have to be trained to make sure they document when they're working to make sure they're getting paid for all the time that they work. It's really important. And it's just because you don't want to charge, you don't want to charge us for your overtime doesn't mean that I can do that, you know?
Right, right. Yeah. As much as, hey, look, we appreciate that and we love that you want to be a team player. That in that example, right? That's somebody that's not compliant, right? So,
No,
and
it's
you,
not.
it's no, so, and it's and what and I guess the other thing there is what would be the amount of savings, especially as you look at that if you do have 50 employees and you've got one person who wants to be that team player and sacrifice some of their own compensation. It's not it's not worth the risk, I suppose.
That's why the
In that
managers have
example.
to know. That's why the managers have to check timesheets. They have to make sure people are writing things down, documenting it, however you document hours, either on your phone, on paper, on a system online, however you document it, it's got to be accurate. And the managers need to kind of keep track of that and know why they're doing it and make sure that it's accurate.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot of great timekeeping systems, even
Yeah.
standalone systems, but a lot of time there's payroll systems that have that as a additional module. Even Employee Navigator, which is the system that we use for open enrollment and just manage the benefit admin system we use. Timekeeping is an additional module that you can add onto that too. So if you're an employer who is unfamiliar with logging time, or you don't do that now, that would be something you could do, or and then maybe a smaller example would be my wife and her cheerleading gym business, right? They just do paper timesheets, right?
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah,
Smaller
there's there's 6 or 7 of them, and so it's like much easier for them to just keep a monthly timesheet, and that's how they keep track of their hours. And then being cheer coaches, they're working most of the time less than 10 hours a week anyway. So, anyways, I just use that as an example. There's plenty of people that still keep track of time that way, but that is certainly something that's important depending on how these jobs are classified and those types of things as well. So, um, yeah. What are some other maybe trends that you're seeing, maybe outside of this salary exemption threshold? Any other kind of trends that you're seeing within your base of clients and the folks that you talk to? And I know you work quite a bit on with HR and finance, just like we do. So yeah, what are those conversations like with HR, and maybe how do those differ from the conversations you're having with finance right now?
Well, one of the things that I've had like two conversations just in the last week about people, do we give people just a market adjustment? What is it going to cost us to make sure everybody's at market and where they should be as far as their experience? Making sure people are paid for all their experience, not just in the job that they're in now, but maybe prior experience before they got there, so relevant experience. Adding that in is like to calculating how much they should be paid. And then the other thing that I would say is we have several clients who are working on getting their people paid a living wage according to the MIT calculator. So those are two trends that I think that people are looking at. How do I make sure people are paid at market and give them everybody an adjustment, or do I give them performance increase? Do I do merit? Do I do just an overall increase? Everybody's kind of revisiting that now that things are getting a little tighter and we're going back to the way things were before recession, which was kind of 3% every year.
Hmm.
So.
Got it. Yeah. And where does the I know there's some changes in our minimum wage here in Washington as well. Where does how does that factor in as well, in your opinion?
Well, I would tell you that LNI has probably the most up-to-date information on, or they will soon. It's not quite updated for 2026 yet, but there's a number of cities in Washington State that have their
Hmm.
own minimum wage, and it's several of it depends on what size employee you are and how much money you made in that city in the last year. What was your annual revenue for that city or overall? It's different by every city, but I have a list of like 10 cities that have a minimum wage just in Washington State. And I'm sure there's other states have the same thing. You just have to make sure that you're in compliant with every law related to pay. Actually, you have to make sure you're in compliant with every law. It's not just
Well,
pay.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, because you could be above board with the salary exemptions and all this, and totally falling flat on some of the ERISA duties that you have, or some of the Consolidated Appropriations Act stuff. Like again, I talked about last month. So yeah, make sure that you're in compliance, and that's to me that's it's I think a lot of times a lot of employers, at least that I've seen over the years, they treat that as compliance as its own checkbox when really compliance is its own section that has checkboxes within that, right? And so it's
Very good.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not an individual sport, it's a team sport. And so you need to have somebody like Nancy in your corner. You need to have some of these
Ooh.
ERISA attorneys, somebody like me. I wasn't going to say that, but anyway, shameless plug. All right, yes, you need somebody like me, or the folks on our compliance team that can help keep you out of hot water, and with the DOL, with the IRS, with the state regulators. It's a really important part of your planning. And as we've seen again over these last few years, it's been trending this direction for several years now, but certainly over these last few, basically since COVID, that's when we saw the CAA, and we've seen all of these things kind of converging in the perfect storm. So you need to make sure that you've got a deep bench and you've got specialists that can help, right? I mean, I think about something like if you're going on trial, you've got all these kind of specialist witnesses, right? That they each have an area of expertise. Somebody might be a blood spatter expert, and somebody else is a DNA expert, and then somebody else is this expert or that, and then all these people, all these witnesses and things, and that's kind of sort of what it's like. Is that you're maybe is the approach with compliance is like just treat it like you're constantly on trial for some kind of capital offense, and you're going to have a team around you that you've assembled that's going to help keep you safe, and keep things move in the right direction, certainly. So
Sure that the HR people listening are excited about the idea of being on trial, but it's okay. I get what you're trying to say.
I know maybe not the greatest most
I
uplifting thing,
can't think of
but
another
again,
I can't think of another analogy though.
right. And tomorrow being Halloween, we want to scare you a little bit. We wouldn't be having any fun here on a Thursday, nearly afternoon here, if we weren't trying to at least frighten you a little bit. But,
Okay, I'll
but no,
grant you that. I'll grant you that. It is as close to Halloween, so
perfect,
yesterday I
perfect.
delivered
Yeah.
some of this news with a witch's hat on, so there you go.
Oh, did you? Yeah, perfect.
They
Oh,
scheduled me
good
as
stuff.
Halloween too on purpose, just like you did.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. Well, good. Well, I feel like maybe at this particular point we're starting to wrap up here. So I always like to ask at the end here two things. One is anything that we haven't covered that you feel like maybe the audience would need to know about. Please chime in with that. And then also, as we wrap up, let people know, how can we find you? How can folks find you? What's the best way to get in contact? Um, and if they want to continue a conversation or open up a dialogue with you and your team.
They can send me an email, Nancy K at compensationconnections.com. Really nice long name. Or you can go to our website, compensationconnections.com, and there's our team page, and I'm the one with the shoes.
Okay.
And I'm just going to
You're
leave
the
it at
one with
that. That makes more people go to the website. So
perfect. Okay. Well, and where my head goes when I hear you're the one with the shoes, it just coming off this witch's hat comment, the image that popped in my mind was when was it the Wicked Witch of the East gets smashed by Dorothy when she lands in Oz and all that. That's the first thing that popped in my head. But anyhow, the ruby
I can tell
slippers,
you where the
perhaps.
shoes come from, so we get rid of that image, okay?
Okay, okay.
Just so every one of us on our team has an avatar. We started that like when Stan and Shannon first opened the company. We just thought that would be a really cool thing. We have a we have a mascot. His name is Link, and all of us have a different version of Link doing something that's important to us in our personal life. Well, my thing in life is I like to walk for exercise. So my avatar has me walking with little blue shoes on. And part of that is because my license plate is I have one of those vanity plates, and it says Walker
Uh-huh.
Girl. So of course I had to have my avatar have shoes on. So little walking shoes.
There you go.
So
Good
now
stuff.
you know why Nancy has walking shoes on.
Right. All right. Good. Yes. Has nothing to do
Has nothing to
with
do
the
with the witches.
tornado.
No,
No, nothing to do with the Wizard of Oz. Okay. Good. No.
no, I promise.
um, and then lastly, again, anything that for the good of the order that you feel like the audience needs to know about with salary exemptions, minimum wage, any of this kind of stuff that you feel like people might need to know about or be aware of.
Not not so much. Just like keep track of all the legal ramifications of all this because it changes every year. It's going to keep changing every year, and you
Hmm.
just want to make sure you're compliant in all the places that you have employees and that they're being paid at the rate that they need to be paid.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as simple as that, folks. All right. Well, you know where to get in touch with Nancy. We will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording to everybody that registered. We'll include Nancy's contact information in that email as well. So I do hope you do connect with her and reach out to her. She is a wealth of knowledge, and as she said, she's a data nerd for this one really specific area. So there's really she's a one of one. Her and her firm are one of one. So anyhow, appreciate you guys being on. I wish everybody a very fun and yet also safe Halloween tomorrow night. Whatever you're doing and whatever you're doing over the course of Halloween weekend, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks again.
Thank you.